Some twist villains change the entire movie the second you rewatch it. Suddenly, every smile, joke, and helpful conversation becomes dangerous. But then you've got the other kind, the ones that crash into the story out of nowhere, like the writers panicked 5 minutes before the credits rolled. Today, we're breaking down both sides of that disaster, from Lotso and Ernesto de la Cruz to Hans, Bellwether, and one painfully recent example that somehow learned absolutely nothing from the others. What's one thing Stinky Pete, Waternoose, and Lotso have in common? We can answer that by looking at these scenes, one from each of the movies where these guys appear. In Toy Story 2, Woody and Jessie are seconds away from tearing each other apart over a TV remote. Woody thinks Jessie tried to sabotage his escape. Jessie fires back instantly, and they start fighting while Bullseye hides. But right in the middle of all that noise is Stinky Pete, who is trying to keep the peace like somebody's tired grandfather.
I don't know how that television turned on, but fighting about it isn't helping anything.
Pete sounds reasonable, calm, and safe. He talks like the only adult in the room, and he has been doing that all through the movie. This same grandfatherly characteristic was exhibited by his successor in Toy Story 3. The moment Andy's toys arrive at Sunnyside, Lotso welcomes them like a retirement home manager giving new guests a tour. He hugs Buzz immediately, talks softly, and smells like strawberries. Even Rex points it out because Pixar wants the audience to think about comfort every second Lotso is on screen. Then he gives the toys exactly what they want emotionally: safety, stability, and a promise of endless love from children. Jessie hears that toys never get abandoned there, and her whole face lights up because she already carries scars from Emily abandoning her years earlier. But Lotso reassures her by pointing toward the walls full of children across different generations.
When the kids get old, new ones come in. When they get old, new ones replace them. You'll never be outgrown.
Pixar understood something very important here. A twist villain needs social value and needs to be trusted before the reveal lands. That part matters a lot because great twist villains usually stand at the emotional center of the room before the reveal happens. Everybody listens to them and follows their lead. Lotso controls the atmosphere within minutes, which tells the audience exactly where trust currently sits. Mr. Waternoose from Monsters, Inc. understands this too. From the start, he acts like Sully's proud mentor. He praises him on the scare floor and treats the company like a family business passed down through generations. He walks around with this old, tired grandpa energy that immediately makes him look trustworthy. Even his voice sounds warm and experienced. When the energy crisis gets worse, Waternoose positions himself as the monster trying to protect everybody from disaster, and Sully and the audience buy into it completely. That relationship is the key. So later, when Waternoose reveals how far he's willing to go for the company by tricking Sully into stepping through the banishment door, the betrayal cuts deeply. But in building trust and significance through a twist villain, you do not always have to make them old or grandfatherly. Sometimes you just gotta do what they did with Ernesto de la Cruz. Ernesto already owns the world before Miguel even meets him. His face is everywhere. His music echoes across the land of the dead and the living world at the same time. Miguel worships him from childhood because Ernesto represents success, music, confidence, fame, and everything Miguel dreams about. But the movie knows it also needs to make us love Ernesto beyond just what people have said about him. So they made his actions reflect kindness. This is why when Miguel falls into the pool, Ernesto jumps in after him dramatically like a hero. He welcomes Miguel into his mansion, speaks warmly to him, and gives advice about dreams and ambition. He was channeling the same grandfatherly nature exhibited by Lotso and the others earlier. And because Miguel wants Ernesto to be good, that desire changes how the audience sees Ernesto too. We watch him through the eyes of a kid searching for inspiration, and that emotional investment makes the truth hit harder later because Miguel attaches identity to Ernesto's image. But to create the most heartbreaking version of building trust and significance, only one twist could achieve that: Uncle Aaron from Into the Spider-Verse. Aaron earns Miles' trust in a deeply personal way by giving the kid space to breathe, where his father pressures Miles constantly about school, responsibility, and discipline. Uncle Aaron takes Miles out to paint graffiti, jokes around with him, and gives him advice about girls.
No. Hey.
He basically treats the kid like his buddy. That relationship gives Aaron enormous emotional weight inside the story, something even Ernesto and Waternoose couldn't achieve. Miles admires him because Aaron accepts every messy part of him. So when the kid discovers Aaron is the Prowler, the scene was extremely painful for all of us. Nevertheless, all these guys still share a similar pattern. Stinky Pete, Blotzo, and Waternoose guide and comfort people. Ernesto inspires while Uncle Aaron understands and relates. They become emotionally important before becoming dangerous, and that's why their reveals stay memorable years later. But once you've been able to build the trust and significance of the twist villains, the next step in their reveal would require a tricky technique that many movies have failed to master even to this day. So one thing that barely gets talked about enough is Uncle Aaron's intro. Look, everybody already agrees that the Spider-Verse movies have some of the greatest character intros in animation history. People always bring up Miguel O'Hara arriving like a futuristic vampire hunter, or the pregnant Spider-Woman casually riding a motorcycle through dimensions. But Uncle Aaron's intro deserves a lot of love too, and for so many reasons, especially pertaining to revealing a twist villain. The scene begins with Miles smiling as he looks outside his dorm room window. Then we see a hand drop the needle on Hypnotize by the Notorious B.I.G., immediately anchoring the scene in Brooklyn culture. Miles moves down a street alive with nighttime city energy and turns into an alley where he sees a light on in a top apartment. Uncle Aaron is texting on his couch when he receives a picture text of himself from 1 second ago. Miles presses his face up against the window, laughing, and asks his uncle if he was scared. Next, Aaron washes dishes while Miles spars with a punching bag. The whole scene carries warmth, fun, and freedom. Aaron immediately looks like Miles's escape from pressure. But if you actually pay attention to Aaron's apartment, the movie starts whispering secrets to you. At first glance, the room looks like a music lover's paradise. Records everywhere, speakers, cool lighting, old school vibes. Aaron looks like the chill uncle who spends weekends listening to hip-hop and telling stories. But then your eyes slowly start catching other details. There's a picture of Aaron boxing hanging on the wall. A punching bag sits inside the apartment too, as well as some stuff on the wall that looks like weapons, likely swords. Later, he takes Miles to a restricted area in a subway to paint graffiti, claiming he did an engineering job there. But even that explanation starts sounding strange once you think about everything else. Nothing from Aaron's apartment suggested engineering. His room looked like a DJ's apartment mixed with a fighter's gym. Then, this same engineering guy just casually climbs over an insanely high gate like somebody trained for dangerous situations. You see how the movie leaves clues, building the Prowler piece by piece? Well, it gets even better. Later, after Miles finishes painting, Aaron suddenly gets a text message. He reads it with the screen close to his eyes and tells Miles he has to leave. Again, the scene moves forward so naturally that most people barely stop to question it during the first watch. But once the Prowler reveal happens, every little moment clicks together perfectly. Even Aaron being unavailable after Miles gets bitten by the spider matters a lot. Miles starts panicking after his powers appear. He scares himself badly enough that he tries calling the one adult who usually understands him, but Aaron's voicemail says he's out of town for a few days. Now, think about that carefully. Why exactly would he disappear for days without answering calls? Why does this engineer move around the city like a trained criminal? Why does his apartment carry signs of combat everywhere? Why does he keep secrets through text messages and sudden unexplained exits? You see, by the time Aaron finally appears as the Prowler, the movie has already prepared the audience for it emotionally and visually. The reveal lands perfectly because the clues existed from the start. The audience simply missed them while getting distracted by Aaron's charm, and that's the magic of good foreshadowing. Now, even though Stinky Pete doesn't have Uncle Aaron's charm, his foreshadowing was equally spot on. He spends most of the movie pushing Woody toward one specific belief: Andy will outgrow him eventually and abandon him someday. Pete talks about it constantly because he desperately wants Woody to accept the museum plan. Even during one of their first conversations, Pete jumps to conclusions strangely fast. Woody barely explains the yard sale situation before Pete starts acting like Andy already threw him away forever.
I was trying to save another toy.
Was it because you're damaged? Did this Andy break you?
Toy Story 3 handles Lotso differently. Mr. Potato Head slips in a puddle during the initial Sunnyside tour, and Lotso barely reacts beyond casually warning him about puddles afterward.
We control our own destiny. Watch out for puddle.
This moment lasts mere seconds, yet it quietly reveals something ugly about him because a caring leader would have helped Mr. Potato Head get up. Then there's the way Lotso controls conversations. Woody tries explaining that Andy never abandoned them, and Lotso cuts him off almost instantly before continuing his speech about heartbreak and owners. Another big clue comes from Lotso disappearing when chaos begins. Once the toys enter the caterpillar room, Lotso casually leaves before disaster starts unfolding. He keeps his hands clean while other toys carry out the ugly work. That's the purpose of foreshadowing. The clues stay visible enough to make sense later, but natural enough to blend into the story during the first watch. Every scene keeps serving two purposes at once. One version entertains you in the moment. The second waits patiently for the reveal. But the craziest part is what these movies do to still make the whole reveal shocking in the end. This is why this next step is critical. So you've successfully foreshadowed the villain. The audience can suspect that something weird is going on. That part is fine, but the real challenge comes from hiding the deeper truth underneath the suspicious behavior, and this can only work through distractions. You see, while you're leaving clues, you also need to be misdirecting the audience by masking the true motives of the villain. Pixar hides Ernesto's motives so well because the movie spends almost 2 hours making us look somewhere else. Miguel's family becomes the main obstacle for most of the story. They ban music completely and treat Miguel's dream like a disease.
No music! No music!
So naturally, Miguel runs toward Ernesto because he represents freedom, success, and passion. That distraction matters a lot. The movie keeps pushing the audience toward one emotional direction. Meanwhile, Ernesto stands far away in the distance, looking like the answer to all of Miguel's problems. Then Hector enters the story, and Pixar plays another trick. Hector looks messy, nervous, and desperate.
Say that was Frida just now? That was a lie, and I apologize for doing that.
He constantly looks like somebody barely surviving, which is a pale comparison to Ernesto, who looks polished and perfect. Most audiences naturally trust Ernesto more during the first watch, because movies have trained us to connect success with goodness. And Ernesto uses that perfectly. Even his kindness secretly serves his own image the entire time. When Miguel reaches Ernesto's party, Ernesto saves him from drowning, pulls him close publicly, and offers him advice privately. Every action keeps Ernesto looking like a loving icon in front of an audience. However, underneath all that charm sits one ugly truth. Ernesto values Ernesto above everybody else, and he is willing to seize the moment to get whatever he wants, including murdering his friend and stealing his songs. But this is where things get super interesting about twist villains. Sometimes, in an attempt to misdirect, you can make the villain a terrible or an obviously sneaky person from the beginning. There would be no need to make them grandfatherly or a musical inspiration here. Yet the reveal would still work. To do this, we have to look at two villains, with the first being the obvious one, King Candy. In Wreck-It Ralph, he rules Sugar Rush like a tyrant long before anyone learns his real name.
Cannot be allowed to race
and bring that thing to my castle.
This eccentric ruler completely rewrites the code of the game, erases Vanellope von Schweiz's memory, and turns her into an outcast, forcing his donut security guards to arrest a little girl just because she wants to race also shows his immense cruelty. But worse, we see him actively cheat during the competition by using secret power-ups to keep his streak alive. Then, he uses emotional manipulation on Ralph by claiming that if Vanellope races, the game will break and she will die. This resulted in Ralph destroying Vanellope's homemade cart, which is probably the most heartbreaking scene in the movie. After that, King Candy locks Vanellope with heavy chains inside a prison. So yeah, the audience already knows King Candy is a horrible dictator. The twist just reveals his true identity as Turbo, a rogue racer from an old arcade game who stole a throne. But even without that reveal, King Candy would still have made a formidable villain for the movie. The other mother, also known as Beldam in Coraline, equally has a similar dynamic to King Candy. The moment Coraline enters the other world, everything already carries this strange energy. The food looks amazing, and the colors pop brighter. But the weirdest part of all of it is how the other father sings songs about her, and the other mother gives Coraline endless attention. Honestly, this alone is already suspicious, especially compared to Coraline's real life, where her parents are constantly busy. But even visually, the movie keeps warning us.
You're just in time for supper, dear.
Those black button eyes immediately create discomfort because nobody can truly read her expressions. And who the hell even has buttons for eyes? It's all so creepy. Then you notice her long twitching fingers, the way she stares too intensely at Coraline sometimes, and even the world itself that she exists in. The cat understands this before Coraline does, and he explains that the other mother creates things specifically to impress children. Every meal, toy, and performance serves one purpose: pull the child deeper into the web. So alone, the other mother still works as a villain long before she locks Coraline behind a mirror and transforms into a giant spider demon.
Now, you're going to stay here forever.
But another thing that is important to note is that whether the villain is obviously a bad person like King Candy or manipulative like Lotso before their reveal, one thing is for sure. A great twist villain must always be the exact same person before and after the mask drops. Their core personality traits should stay completely identical. Before the reveal, Ernesto is a grand theatrical showman who loves the spotlight and demands the attention of the entire world. After the reveal, his personality remains exactly the same. He is still a theatrical showman who loves the spotlight.
Orchestra, a 1, a 2, a 1.
But the audience now sees that he will commit murder to keep that spotlight shining on him. His vanity never changes. That consistency matters because the villain starts looking like a real person instead of a completely different character created only for shock value. So you've been able to build trust and significance for our twist villain. You've also foreshadowed their evil while hiding their real motives. But the work isn't done yet. You still need one last step on how to reveal a twist villain before we tackle how not to. In Toy Story 2, Woody finally convinces Jessie and Bullseye that life with Andy matters more than sitting inside a museum forever. And right there, Stinky Pete completely changes. The old grandfather act disappears instantly, and out comes the pickaxe. Across the apartment vents, Pete screws the exits shut and traps everyone inside the room.
You're out of your box!
Earlier scenes suddenly gain a whole new meaning after Pete admits he turned on the television himself and framed Jessie on purpose. Years of bitterness finally explode out of him because he spent his entire existence sitting untouched inside a box while other toys got loved by kids. Woody stands there realizing every comforting conversation Pete had with him carried manipulation hidden underneath it. Meanwhile, Toy Story 3 stretches Lotso's reveal across multiple stages, which makes the final collapse even stronger. First comes Buzz discovering the truth after surviving the caterpillar room. Toddlers smash toys around violently, while Lotso relaxes safely upstairs in the butterfly room. So Buzz asks for a transfer, expecting kindness from the same strawberry-smelling bear who welcomed everybody earlier. Instead, Lotso explains that somebody has to suffer for the system to work.
Those caterpillar kids need someone to play with.
But my friends don't belong there.
Oh, none of us do.
Seconds later, Buzz gets captured and reset into demo mode, turning him against his own friends.
Slide the switch from play to demo.
Stop! No!
Elsewhere, Woody learns the deeper truth from Chuckles the Clown. Daisy accidentally losing Lotso changed him forever. Finding another bear replacing him completely shattered whatever softness remained inside him. That backstory matters because the daycare prison suddenly makes sense. Lotso controls Sunnyside through fear because he already believes every toy eventually gets replaced and abandoned anyway. Then comes the garbage chute scene, where the entire illusion finally collapses in public. Here, Woody reveals the truth about Daisy in front of Big Baby, and anger takes over Lotso immediately.
She lost you.
She replaced us.
She replaced you. And if you couldn't have her, then no one could.
Right there, he smashes Big Baby's locket and screams that toys are trash waiting to be thrown away. His own followers hear everything and soon realize the truth. Coco also deals with its villain reveal similarly because Ernesto de la Cruz loses control through exposure as well. But whatever form the reveal eventually takes, each one of them works because the villain controls the space at first. Pete traps Woody inside the apartment, Lotso controls Sunnyside like a prison warden, and Ernesto hides behind lore and fame. Then, the truth breaks apart that control piece by piece until the villains finally destroy themselves with their own words and actions. That's why staging matters so much in a twist villain reveal. Pressure forces honesty out into the open. Locked rooms, public crowds, garbage chutes, concert stages, or whatever. Every location becomes part of the emotional explosion. But now, it's time for the most interesting part of revealing a twist villain. Firewolf or Boogle from the movie Swapped honestly feels like proof that studios keep walking into the same trap over and over again. Earlier movies already showed exactly how weak twist villains collapse when the setup falls apart. Yet, somehow, Swapped looked at Hans, Bellwether, and Axelrod, then still drove straight into the same wall anyway. At this point, studios and their writers just need to subscribe to this channel to avoid making the same mistake over and over again, right? Anyway, Swapped is a 2026 movie by Skydance Animation set in a flooded valley filled with animal-plant hybrid creatures like the Pukus and Javans. But these creatures have lived divided for years after a monster called the Firewolf destroyed the land long ago. The story follows Ollie, a young Puku, Ivy, a Javan chick, and Boogle, a goofy fish creature who joins their journey across the valley in search of magical pods left behind by the ancient Joe. This Boogle guy spends most of the movie acting like comic relief.
Wait, 1 moment ago counts as a long time, right? No. Oh, then no!
Every scene pushes him into goofy reactions, awkward jokes, and harmless little side moments with Ollie and Ivy. Then suddenly, the movie asks the audience to accept him as a terrifying fire monster who burned down valleys and hunted magical creatures.
I know. Maybe I could just become the Fire Wolf.
That jump makes no sense, even though the story managed to nail the first step of revealing a twist villain. We just pointed out that a great twist builds significance early. Boogle does that to some extent by showing the heroes where all the pods are and assisting them through dangers. He is not like Don Bellwether, who had limited screen time. Judy Hopps never builds a deep friendship with Bellwether, meaning the eventual betrayal carries zero emotional weight. However, Boogle builds a connection with the heroes Ivy and Ollie, but he fails in every other step that comes after. You see, the second step demands clear foreshadowing, a requirement that Swapped completely ignores. It gave the audience zero visual hints of Boogle's dangerous side. Characters talked about how Firewolf burned the valley and tormented the magical Joe creatures, But Boogle never displays a single ounce of cruelty like we saw with Lotso or Ernesto. The guy was a totally great person from his very first scene until his sudden reveal. He was just like Prince Hans, who was set up as the ultimate gentleman during the song Love is an Open Door. His early choices actively contradict his evil plot, like when he redirects a crossbow bolt to save Elsa on the mountain. Also, stopping the Duke's men from assassinating the Queen directly sabotages his own goal of taking the throne.
I, on the other hand, am the hero who was going to save Arendelle from destruction.
But as if that's not enough, another massive issue comes from the motives. In Swapped, Boogle gets a tragic backstory about being the runt of the litter abandoned by his wolf pack, but his detail arrives far too late after his reveal. And you can't even talk about masking this motive because his entire evil identity was completely hidden. So this defeats the purpose of Step 2. The same thing was seen with Hans, who explains his sudden murderous turn by dropping a single line about having 12 older brothers. Feels like a lazy excuse to justify a sociopathic leap from loving prince to maniacal killer. Then, in Cars 2, Axelrod's plan makes even less financial sense. Funding a massive 3-continent world Grand Prix and building an alternative fuel called All in All just to blow up the racer's engines requires millions of dollars. The idea that destroying his own product would make his secret oil reserves profitable is total economic nonsense. Staging the climax represents the final step, which completely crumbles when the villain lacks power. Bellwether only gets 5 minutes of screen time as a villain before getting tricked into a confession. This short time frame robs her of the opportunity of looking like a formidable threat. Axelrod looks equally incompetent during his big moment at Buckingham Palace. Mater, one extremely dumb car, corners him, and this criminal mastermind immediately crumbles like a coward to save his own life from a bomb. And then Boogle yells that there was never Boogle, which was basically cringe and unwarranted.
Boogle?
There was never Boogle.
At the end of the day, a terrible reveal destroys the entire journey, leaving the audience irritated by the sudden shift. Master storytellers look at these exact failures to understand what to avoid during the writing process. Every single piece must fit perfectly from the very beginning of the script. If you want to see another masterclass in unconventional storytelling that breaks all the usual rules, check out our previous video on what Rango does that Disney doesn't. That video uncovers exactly how a weird little chameleon bypassed the corporate formula to create a narrative masterpiece.